Hello and welcome back to part 2 of our lectures this week, focused on our topic of data-based decision making. We have 2 session objectives, and that is to build on the work done last week and identify strategies used for effective school improvement initiatives. Ultimately, you will be creating a school improvement plan for part 3 of assignment 2. So it's really important that as you're doing the readings, you think about these best practices for schools that have beat the odds so that you can integrate them into your plan. And then our second objective is to describe practices for improving the performance of all students through data-based decision making. So let's dig in. So chapter 5 is on reading assessment. Why is this relevant? Well, a literacy coach is likely to select some or all of the assessments used in the building if they're wearing that curriculum expert planner hat. They're also going to be training teachers to give the assessments if they're wearing that, coach as teacher hat. They may conduct screening assessments as well, so wearing the tester hat, which isn't even one we read about in chapter 1 of Walpole and McKenna. They are going to need to be able to interpret and summarize the assessment data, and we'll talk about that a little more in a minute, coach as interpreter. They also need to be able to plan programmatic changes based on trends in the assessment data, and communicate the instructional techniques with teachers based on the assessment data. So it's important for you to know your stuff when it comes to the assessment data, what it says, and the direction you need to take. So assessment. It is important that there is a clear schedule for conducting assessments developed before the school year, when these assessments will be occurring and who will be administering them. Thinking about those screening assessments, diagnostic assessments, progress monitoring assessments, and outcome assessments. I have a slide coming up that explains all of those in case you need a little review. Also, it's important to train teachers on the administration of the assessments to ensure reliability of the assessment results. Not only how to administer the assessment, but how to score it so that someone isn't more lenient on their responses, or, for instance, if it's a measure of oral reading fluency, if they are feeding words to kids, which is going to impact their performance and bias it, because if I tell you a word and then it appears later in the passage, then I'm going to be doing better. And then this is also going to improve my comprehension of the passage. So really thinking about your procedures and protocols for administering assessments consistently, and then also scoring them. Are we going to give half points? Are we going to expect the direct answers? Or are we going to ask probing questions? All of these things so that the results are reliable. Because you would hate for one teacher, a first grade teacher, to end the year and say, yeah, your child is reading at this level, and then, it might be a lot higher than their actual performance. And so the parent isn't getting the appropriate information. And then maybe the second grade teacher is definitely more conservative with their testing results and, not inflating the score. So everyone in the building needs to be on the same page. And a lot of times this falls on the shoulders of the reading specialist literacy coach to get everyone on that same page. So not only train the teachers on administering the assessments, but also on interpreting the data so that they can see value in collecting this data. So if they're giving these assessments, they need to see the utility of the results and how they can then use that to plan their instruction. And then making sure that you are summarizing the data. And I know in the text it talks about math fear. And, I am not a statistician. I don't know how to analyze data. Really, all you need to worry about are percentages and averages. That's all you really need to do. And when you summarize the data, you want to report proficiency. So what percent of students are currently proficient on grade level, and you want to monitor that as the year progresses. And then, what percent of students are making the growth that they need to be making? Who is at risk of not meeting the amount of growth we have set for them? And then also communicating results internally, so within, staff, teaching staff, but then also the broader staff, all personnel, and then externally, so maybe to superintendent, maybe to the community, maybe to the parents. So communication of that. So as I foreshadowed, here are those different test types, a description of them, and then an example. Note that tests are tools after all, and many tools can be used for many purposes. So at my site, we did the developmental reading assessment, the DRA, and we used that as a screening test at the beginning of the year because it told us who wasn't reading on grade level. And then we really teased apart the data and used it as a diagnostic because you can do a miscue analysis and get some really detailed information from it. We also used it as a progress monitoring tool, giving it every 4 to 6 weeks to see if students are moving up reading levels, and then used it as an outcome test to see at the end of the year who was now reading on grade level. So a lot of tools can be used for different purposes. You don't necessarily need to have a screening test that's different from the diagnostic test from progress monitoring, etc. Typically, the diagnostic test, though, is more in-depth, takes more time, administered one-on-one, and not given to your entire student population, just those identified as ones who are significantly behind. So that's a note on that. Page 100 and 101 has resources for your strategic planning of assessment, which is so key because without the strategic planning of assessment, you're not going to have any data to analyze to inform your next steps. So here's a sample assessment schedule that I created as a literacy specialist. I identified, these are the general educator responsibilities. They are going to accurately assess guided reading levels of all students every 5 weeks and turn in an assessment grid on time to the intervention team, which was led by myself. Then they're going to meet with the intervention team monthly to reflect on the guided reading data. So prior to that, I would do some analysis so that I could kind of share that with them and we could collaborate on where to go now. Then they're going to use the strategies created in the guided reading data meeting to address the needs of intervention students in general education, and then provide the intervention team with any communication about targeted students by responding to the weekly check-in email. So after I progress monitored my intervention students, I would then be sending a weekly email to the teachers letting them know what I noticed essentially on the running record I gave, and then they needed to respond to that. I also sent home a parent report to communicate the weekly or biweekly progress monitoring to the parents. So basically, we use the DRA for the beginning, middle, and end of the year, as that assessment is pretty time consuming and not meant to be given so frequently. It's more of a benchmarking tool. And then in the meantime, we used Reading A to Z, has level text and comprehension questions. So we used those in between the DRA kind of as a progress monitoring tool for all students. So in addition to having your data calendar or schedule, it's important to have a data plan. So that shows how you're going to collect the data. So 3 times a year, teacher administer DIBELS, and they also administer ELA benchmark assessments. And then each month they're doing a DRA or Reading A to Z. Students qualifying for intervention are going to receive these diagnostics. They're also going to get running records each week during running record time. Going to get progress monitored, yada, yada, yada. So that's how the data is being collected. How it's being managed, we're going to input it into the DIBELS website. You can, pause this and read through that. I'm going to show you the tool I created for most of the data management that happened. And then communicating the data Each month, the teachers send me their reading recorder that I'll show you. I then summarize the data there, right? That's where the importance of summarizing the data comes in. I'm going to summarize the data for the whole school. So at any given point, we know whole school, how many kids are proficient, how many aren't, who's making growth, who isn't, so we can intervene ASAP. And then the intervention team is going student by student to discuss the data. Then data intervention team is meeting with the classroom teacher to go over this. We also had a data wall in our learning center to show where each student is currently reading at, and it's color coded by grade level. We had a little celebration wall where all students moving up 3 or more levels have a photo on the data wall holding a little trophy. Summary sheet given to parents as well as the teachers. So again, want to think through not only your assessment calendar, but a plan for how you're collecting, managing, communicating your data. So this is an Excel document I created called the Reading Recorder. This is the summary tab. So it has a tab for each assessment window on our calendar. And then what's nice about Excel is that you can input formulas. So this summary sheet, teachers would type in the students' names and then it would carry on to all of these tabs. And then this information was actually being pulled from, on this tab, whatever their reading level was, it was coming there. So this was their summary sheet that you could quickly look at to see, how this student is progressing. Here they went from a 10 to a 14. They kind of sat at the 14 and then went up to 16. So really helpful to see that. And then this is the tab for the first assessment. So, what is their level? What level were they tested at? What were the miscues, the accuracy, self-corrections, any notes? And then how did they do on comprehension? Any notes there? And then this is what they would use to plan their small group guided reading instruction. And then I would also look at this for planning my intervention and collaborating with the teacher on interventions that could even be happening in the classroom. So once I received that each month, I then was compiling the data by teacher, what percentage of their students moved at least one grade level, how many students are at the grade level goal, how many students are within one level of the goal, how many are currently receiving some tier 1 additional targeted instruction that the class was providing, and then who is receiving tier 2 supports and tier 3 supports. And then as the year progressed, so this is December, we had 79% of our students go up a reading level, which is awesome. We, at the start of the year, only had 15% of students. This was our first year as a brand new school in a really low income area. And so at the beginning of the year, we had 15% of students reading on grade level. By December, we had 25%, so 10% increase is awesome. And then this is, how many are within one level. So we went from 32% being on or within one level up to 38% by December. And then this is pretty notable, is that at the beginning of the year, we had 12% of our students who were significantly behind in need of tier 3 support. We decreased that to 3%, but then that bumped up our, number of students we were then servicing with tier 2 support. So we decreased the people who were significantly behind, and as a result, that increased the percent of tier 2 students being serviced. So again, this is just a summary where we're looking at, percentages, percent of kids who moved, percent of kids who are reading on grade level. Don't have to be a mathematician to do this. All right, since your reading articles this week are optional, I wanted to quickly highlight a few things from them in case you opted not to read that article. The first one, how one elementary school uses data to help raise students' reading achievement. This is about Westwood Elementary School. they've been doing well, but then they flatlined, specifically students on IEPs. That subgroup was kind of bringing them down. So the principal instituted professional learning communities and growth occurred. So this is a huge success story in favor of professional learning communities, which are going to be a better way to implement professional learning and development. And that's why we're using that method of delivery and execution in part 3 of assignment 2. So how did they do this? They established a culture of continuous school improvement. This might sound very familiar to some of the things we read about last week. And they paid attention to 3 factors. First, they had specialized reading professionals. Hey, we're going to get the most qualified and well-trained people to work with those students at need. That's what needs to happen. We're also going to establish professional learning communities, and these are really going to be focused on reading achievement. Not that math and the other subject areas aren't important, but maybe let's start by focusing on reading. And then once we see some success there, then we can look at other areas. Then putting in place systems that support student, teacher, and school performance. So you can read more about that in that article, but bottom line is, PLCs were really effective in helping them make growth with their students. The next article is interesting because it's really focused on data, the what, the how, and the why. So they begin by talking about 3 different types of data you need to look at, because so often we're really just focused on reading performance data, but that doesn't really show the big picture. So there's also professional development data. So after you have some sort of professional development or training, do you have an exit survey? How are you measuring what the teachers got from, that professional learning opportunity? There's also classroom data. So teacher observations, what are you seeing in instruction? And then there's the student achievement data. So you need to be looking at all 3 of these kinds of data to make decisions. And they have fantastic guiding questions in this article as you, as a leader of literacy achievement, look at the different data areas. So professional development data, think about this, classroom data, student data, boom. Then they give you a framework for instructional decision making, which might be something you include in assignment 2. And they walk you through the steps. You got to get teams together, partners, so they can analyze. You have a recorder for the team. The partners analyze the data. Then the teams put it all together in a discussion of their finding, and then they together devise the professional development. The team plans when and how they will communicate their plan and monitors the implementation of their plan. And then they wrap up by kind of giving some suggestions for making the most of assessments. So for classroom-based assessment, it should assess more than a single skill, go beyond a narrow curriculum to assess a wide range of skills. And that's what Common Core has really done, is shown how different skills are integrated and more of a holistic approach to reading. So really having assessment that goes beyond one skill, using formative assessments, which are aligned with actual instruction, designing multimodal assessments, which is another push with, Common Core, integrating different media types, and then also developing teacher expertise. So taking the time and really developing teachers on assessment, how to do it effectively, how to utilize the data, how to plan instruction. So that's all I wanted to tell you about that. Keeping it a little bit shorter this week so that you can really focus your effort and energy on doing those other assignments for the week. So to launch you, I have a quote I recently read, prepping some stuff for 595, and it says, "Data-driven decision-making is the new mantra." Hey, we have a whole unit on it in this course. Yet some have suggested that the result has been to leave educators data-rich and information poor. So hopefully that's not the case in your school, but I've seen that it is oh so typical that you might be swimming in data. You have lots of assessment data, lots of information, but no time to process it. And then the data isn't providing you the information you need to actually improve learning not just teaching, but learning. Learning is the ultimate outcome that we want to impact. So, what are you going to do about that as a reading specialist, literacy coach? How are you going to use this assessment data to make teachers information rich? All right, I leave this with you. Have a great week, and I will see you back for week 5, where we continue talking about these important topics of assessment and data.